Thank you very much for the kind invitation to that nice and important conference. I will be talking on the relationship between, I called it age and technology, and obviously it is a title which borrows a lot from the recent discussion on the race between man and machine, which has been put forward from colleagues like Brynjolfsson and others. And in fact, my perspective is that I try to understand the interaction between individuals and human welfare, and in that relationship, technologies play a key role. So that's very clear. And let me be clear with respect to the result. Actually, I don't see that there is a race, but there is a strong interaction between these two key determinants. What I brought you here is an overview that has been provided by Gapminder World by a platform which is labeled Gapminder. It is an open source platform. It borrows data from several public domains. And what you see here very precisely is that there is a strong relationship between wealth on the one side and health on the other side. So you see on the horizontal axis, you see the income per capita, and that's a snapshot of the year 2015, so that's the most recent data available for this relationship. On the vertical axis, you see the health perspective, and it especially shows you the life expectancy at birth, and you see the colors. They provide the different places across the world, and you see there is a huge variety across all countries and also across the different continents that you see here, but you see the trend is positive and there is a huge positive correlation. You see the size of the bubbles, they show you the size of the respective population, and they also provide dynamic perspectives of this relationship that you see here, and you can clearly see that there is an upward trend, that we do have a kind of heterogeneity across the world, but obviously personal individual welfare compared here or measured by income per capita, so that's the horizontal axis, has to do with the life expectancy at birth, and we see that these are correlate. So we have a correlation between life expectancy and we have wealth, and the question is, which role does technology play in this relationship in between? If we look from an economic perspective, since I'm an economist, that's the view that I see. I'm always interested in understanding not only what drives growth, but what drives technological change. And the question is, how does that interact with the society and how does that interact with the individuals? And what we know already from the literature is that technological change is not neutral. Different individuals are affected differently, and the impact on the direction of the technological change has several channels. So one is the market size. The market size means that technology will always develop in a certain direction, given that there is a certain market of those skills, individuals who are complementary to that technology because it enhances individual productivity. That's one perspective. In that sense, technological change leads to a technical development that favors the abundant factors. In that sense, whatever we provide as societies with respect to skills will also drive the technological development. So here we have this interaction. On the other side, this point has already been made by the former speakers, and especially Japan as a showcase is obviously very natural to look at, is technology might also help to overcome scarcity, in a sense of if you have missing skills, and then innovation is driven by the scarcity that you have in a country, and it helps to overcome that scarcity. If you look at the economic discussion that we've do at academics is that the directed technological change perspective is rather old and settled. In these days, we more look on the roles of skills of the individuals, and again we see that the interaction between skills and technologies is far from being clear or being always directed in the same way. If you look at the first industrial revolution, so if you look at the second line here, we have seen that the unskilled individuals benefited a lot from technological change. And that has been one example also shown by Franz Waldenberger before, is that we see that technology might be utilized to facilitate handling of machines. In that sense, if you have a technology, that might help overcome scarcity with respect to skills, and the unskilled biased technological change that we had seen in the late 18th and the beginning 19th century, there it was the case that the high qualified have been replaced by the technology, whereas since the 1940s of the last century, we see that this changes, that increasingly the highly skilled benefited from technological change in a sense of that they become even more productive, and there began this race between man and machine. But at the end of the day, whatever drives the direction of the technological change will be the relative R&D profitability. So that's completely clear. What we discussed today is that we not only focus on skills, and especially the labor market implications that are heavily discussed in these days, distinguish now clearly between skills and jobs and tasks. In that sense, we see that not full job profiles disappear, but we have a change in job profiles, and what will be substituted or complemented by technology is individual tasks. And just for getting an idea about how the discussion is framed, that's a paper from 2003 already, so you see these are not very new ideas, so the ideas already have been around since a couple of years. But what we see is a distinction or a differentiation between the routine tasks and the non-routine tasks on the one side, and on the other side we see cognitive and manual tasks as things or as perspectives of analysis. And before the days of big data, of artificial intelligence, in former days it has been easily or increasingly we see that automation took place in the routine part, where we have codified knowledge and where it is able to substitute all these individual tasks by any machine. But in these days, increasingly, the machines also get competence in becoming able to deal with unstructured environments, and in that sense also to become productive as a complement to the individuals are around in this field. And the technology takes place until now mostly with respect to routine replacing technological change, but at the same time we see that probably also non-routine tasks will become under pressure. So as we had seen before, and also Professor Tsunami pointed this out, is that productivity is a key driver of welfare, a key driver of growth. And the question is, what role does automation play here? Again, a concept which is not super new. It has already been around since 50 years. It is well renowned under the label of Baumol's cost disease. And what we see here is that we have to differentiate the economy from a sectoral perspective if we try to understand the impact of the automation potential. So there are sectors where the automation potential is very huge and where it already has been exploited extremely by different countries. And these sectors which have automation potential, the following happens. In these sectors, what we see is the labor productivity, that is the productivity of output per person, output per hour increases by the use of technology. But what does that mean? At the end of the day, people become more productive, their wages increase, the product prices at the same time remain even constant. So in that sense, we see that we benefit from the technology. In contrast to this, what we see is that there are other sectors. There, we are not able to increase labor productivity by the use of automation. Why is that the case? It is the case because it is individual activity, because we need the personal interaction. But what is the outcome then? If you're not able to increase the labor productivity by automation, and these individuals are working in different sectors, the workers are competing with workers in other sectors, and in that sense, the wages in other sectors when they increase there, they will make it more attractive to get out of these service industries. In that sense, we have sectors, mainly the service sectors, where the automation potential so far has been very low, but people working there are in an international competition with, well, other countries, but also other sectors. And in that sense, it's the wage in the other sector which drives also the wage in the low productivity sector. And in that sense, we see that the service sector, it always becomes increasingly more important. We don't see the productivity increase there, but we see an increase in the costs there as the wages increase due to the rise in the wages in the other sectors. And as a consequence, we see an overall increase in costs, or put differently, ADCs, because this low productivity sector becomes always more important as economies become more involved. So the outcome is that over time we see that the relative price of services over goods from the manufacturing sector increases. And the question is, may AI help solve this problem? And here I've shown you, these are pictures from Germany. It's from the German Academic Advisory Board of the government from the 2016 report, and it's the figure, I think, always around, independent in which country in the developed world you look. We have a distinction between the manufacturing sector and the service sector. We see here the contributions of different parts of technology to total factor product, to outcome growth. So what you see here is a decomposition. You see the annual growth rates, we see a decline in the annual growth rates, and we see that especially the orange part, which is the total factor productivity, which is a kind of a representative of innovation capacity of a country, it decreases over time, and it increasingly decreases even in the service sector. And the question is, do we find a solution in order to help resolve this problem? And one answer could be the increased use of automation. So what I brought you here is data from the recent report of the International Federation of Robotics. You see here a timeline from 2009 to 2017, and I chose the 5 most important robot countries across the world, and since we're in Taiwan, I also included Taiwanese data, so I collected it and put it into place. And if we look at the robot density and we talk about the interaction between a man and machine, robot density exactly means the ratio between industrial robots utilized over 10,000 employees in a certain sector. And here you see already in these countries, there is quite some heterogeneity. There is a kind of dynamics. And we see also, well, since we have heard a lot about Japan already, so Japan is more stagnating. Korea is has a huge robot density. Germany is not that dynamic as one expects, but we are already at a rather high level. Here you see another picture. Again, it's the robot density, but now it's a comparison between the automotive sector and all other industries that are around. And here you see, before I had shown you the overall figures for the countries. Now we have, from a country's perspective, in the year 2017, the distinction between different industries. And again, you see here a huge heterogeneity within each country and with respect to the sectors. In that sense, automation, the question is, what does it mean? It depends upon where you look at it. And you see we have the highest automation in the automotive industry, and especially for Germany. Yeah, the question is how to proceed, and it is also clear that the next most important part of welfare won't be the manufacturing sector, but it will be more data-driven, it will be more the electrical industry, and it will be more the merging between hardware and software, including the societal aspects discussed before. So what I brought you here is just that you get a feeling that there is a strong correlation between the two lines that you see in each of the 6 panels. That's everything which I want you to see there. On the horizontal axis, again, you see the timeline, and on the vertical axis, I have plotted the evolution of robot investment on the one side, and another indicator that I chose was patenting activity in the robots industry. So this data is data that we have taken on our own. So what did we do? The goal, so that's a recent work within my group at KIT, and what we try to understand is, since we are aware about the importance, the increasing importance of the service sector, and since we know that the automation potential there has been very low so far, and since we also know that the future potential growth will be expected from the service sector, and there also will be the huge markets for robotics use, we try to better understand, is there any, or are we able to detect patterns within patenting activity in order to get a feeling about what will go on in the robots industry. And the question is it worthwhile to have a look at it, yes or no? And my answer would be yes, it is worthwhile to have a closer look at patenting activity, because all the correlates that you see here is, on the one side, patenting activity in the robotics field, and on the other side, investment in robotics for, again, the 6 countries shown before, namely Germany, Japan, the US, Korea, China, and Taiwan. Again, I took the data in here, and again, Japan on the lower left part is a bit different to the rest of the world, but the takeaway is it is worthwhile to have a closer look at the patenting activity. So that's all I want you to see here. And what we did then is we distinguish. We already understand quite good the work of industrial robots, but we also are aware about the fact, and we is not us, my group, but it is the International Federation of Robotics, and they are the experts. They expect the largest market in the service sector. But the question is, what is the service sector? They have a kind of a slightly different perspective, but what is most important here is they distinguish, so it's, if they discuss about service robots, they distinguish, so that's the right part, between robots for private use. These are the smaller and less valuable robots, I would say, on the left side. And on the right side, they are for professional use. And here are the future markets. And the point is that with the existing matrices, we're not able to identify what's going on in research in that field. And what we then did is we applied a topic modeling approach in order to better understand how does robotic industries evolve and how this is driven by the innovative activity in before. So what did we do? We downloaded all USPTO patents, and we downloaded the full text. This allows us to work with unstructured data, and after some, and well, that's a kind of a restriction to the total data set, but it is completely fine because we checked if we lose a lot of information or not. What we is, at the end of the day, we ended up with some 70,700 patents. So people would not call this big data, but we have the full text. We're working with the full text, and we try to understand the structure within this text and how this evolves and how we might link this again to the perspectives between the industrial sector and the service sector. And today I only bring you intermediate results. It's not yet the full picture, but I think we already are able to detect some interesting patterns. And what we see, even if we only look at USPTO patents, so that does not mean, well, maybe I should be more precise. These are all the patents that have been filed at the USPTO by countries across the world. So that's why you see below the figure with the different country perspective. So in green, you see the US. In blue, you see Taiwan and China. Orange is Germany. Red is Germany. Orange is Korea. And gray is Japan. So we have the full international perspective, but we only have the full text available from the patents from the USPTO that have been filed there. But all the countries, independent upon where research takes place, usually, if they find it valuable, they also apply for a patent in the US. And these are even granted patents. So that's why you have the international perspective. So it's not only the US perspective. So let me be precise about this. And here, that's the figure from the inventor, but you could also, the applicant perspective, take in front, so that the picture would look identical. So we see a huge dynamics, and the dynamics increases, and the US are still the leaders. Maybe it is, well, a small bias here, and what we expect is that China probably is a bit underrepresented due to legal perspectives. We might discuss this later, but the general picture, I think, is completely fine. What did we then do? We applied a topic modeling approach, and I don't want to go into details, but the idea is, I just want to give you an idea about our thoughts on this. We wanted to try to understand how this technology evolves. If we try to categorize it with the existing matrices, the service sector does not show up. So the official patent databases only give you information about the ISIC sector and the International Standard Industry Classification, and there the service sector is compared to what is actually going on too small, and we are especially not able to link this to the investment of the Industrial Federation of Robotics, to the investment data. But we wanted to link this to the investment data and get a feeling about the important service sectors that we had seen before. And let me go back. I think it is worthwhile to look at the robots for professional use. Most important are medical robots, are logistic robots, are defense robots, rescue, security, field, professional cleaning. So, and then there are smaller ones. Well, exoskeletons are also becoming very important in these days, so that you get a feeling about how the field of service robots is characterized. And to get this perspective within the patent data, you might not utilize, or you will not get that picture if you apply the existing matrices. That's why we apply the new data method. We downloaded, as already said, the full text of all the patents, and then we applied this topic modeling approach. And the question is why why do we get additional information out of this? Well, we are able to interpret not only the words, but also the words already in the content. We are also able just to get the results out of a machine, so we don't have an expert bias. So we need the experts in order to discuss with them our results, but our results are not driven by what we put inside. So we just let the machine calculate. So we have no expert bias assignments with respect to the patents to the topics. And what we do is with the topic modeling approach, so we assign all the patents to different topics and try to understand how they evolve over time. And we did this, I would say, exercise with different, with different methods. Don't want to go into details, but if you look, a topic just means that it combines words together or puts them together that work in a different, in similar context. And what I brought you here are word clouds from 110 topics, which we calculated, and it's clear if the word surgical pops up, it has to do with a medical application. The same here on the lower left side. So we are able to identify and to trace this back to the patents, how this field evolves over time. We did it, as already said, for 110 topics. We also did it for 200 topics and also for another amount of topics. But you see here, just for getting an idea how these word clouds look around. And the question is then, how do these topics evolve over time? And here you see the temporal weight matrices of these patents, and you see the only thing that you should take with you is if you look at the investment in robots, you always see this increase. It only goes up, only one direction. If you look at the patenting activity which takes place before, it is way more differentiated. There are hot topics which are coming up, that are topics which are declining over time. And you see here in the colors, blue, red, and green, the 110 topics, how they evolved from a research perspective over time. And we are able to, each of this graph might be linked to a word cloud, and in that sense to a topic. And if we go back to the medical place, you see the two word clouds that I brought you before, and I have highlighted with the orange rectangles the corresponding evolution over time, and you see there is a huge increase over time. And since patents are a predictor for what is going on from a technological perspective, I think that's a nice story that we already see. We can see it for transportation. Here the picture is mixed, so the dynamics is not that clear as in medical industries. And if we go in the field, so it's called field robotics, it's more agricultural, but it is service robotics, it's not the agricultural sector here. Here we again see that patenting activity has become more important over time. Okay, so let me conclude my talk with the following. So maybe that's now a bit quick. We have seen that the technology evolves over time. I do not see that there is a race between individuals and technology, but I see that individuals evolve differently and that the technology evolves differently, and especially that the technology also adapts to the needs of the individuals. And both, I think, technology on the one side, man on the other side, are drivers and outcome of each other. As we had seen at the very first slide, that wealth has been driven by technology and technology is driven by our thoughts, so it's us. I would also see the opportunities, as stressed before from my two former talkers, that age comes also along with experience, and we should benefit from this experience. But it is important to keep people healthy. That's also clear. Individual needs will affect the direction of technological change, and if a society is aging, the overall needs become differently, and that will affect technological development. I think that's very clear. I see AI as a potential to overcome the stressed cost disease, in a sense of that we hopefully will be able at some point of time to overcome the productivity decline in the service sector. And institutions, in a sense of the way how we organize our societies, our economic relationships, they have always mattered, and they will be mattering for more times. And that's my very last slide. So policy implications of my talk is we should see age, as already said, not only as a challenge but as an opportunity. I think digital literacy must become mandatory part of the education. That's in Germany still a discussion. You probably might wonder about this, but we have a huge discussion in Germany about this. And what we see from Baumol's-Kost think, we are constrained by things that are essential, but which we are not yet good at and which are hard to improve, and hopefully the new technologies help us overcome this. What we need to be also is that each country, since we're in an international competition, is the discussion, do we want to develop technologies or do we just want to apply the technologies? So I think that's a discussion that we increasingly have now in Germany. Will we really just apply, or will we again be those who help shape the technologies? And in that sense, we are still to work on our research agenda. Thank you very much.